Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, a Pittsburgh Steelers podcast made by fans like you, for fans like you. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. You know, I was thinking the other day, and in talking with one of my friends, and albeit he is a Denver Broncos fan, which was a bit awkward come, December and January of this year. Nonetheless, me and him, we still BS sports despite our small difference. And of course, with him one-upping me later on in the season with the Broncos beating the Steelers in the playoffs. But aside from that point and getting some bragging rights in the process, there's a lot of free agent wheeling and dealing going on between both of those teams and, of course, the other 30 teams in the NFL. And it got me thinking. I've been doing a lot of talking about how the Pittsburgh Steelers can't build an all-star team, or even for that matter, the Denver Broncos can't build an all-star team, or anyone can't build an all-star team. And I've been taking the perspective of just simply why the front offices can't build these superstar, all-star, all-pro teams. And I've only taken the business angle of it, the dollars and cents, and not really the X's and O's from a player's perspective. Because after all, there are teams that can afford or decide to offer certain players a certain amount of money. And some will take that offer and some won't. And using the two teams, such as the Denver Broncos and the Pittsburgh Steelers as an example, we could look at several players. The correlation being maybe Brock Osweiler as a quarterback who just won a Super Bowl ring, had a few starts, and appeared to have a major future in Denver ahead of him. He looked like the heir apparent to Peyton Manning, the chosen one from John Elway, their general manager and former Broncos great at a quarterback position himself. And you'd think to yourself, why would Brock Osweiler choose the Houston Texans over the Denver Broncos? And a lot of times people think that it's only money. And I kind of felt that maybe I was going on the premise of the way these teams get built or deconstructed may only be financial reasons as well. And of course, we know that's not true because some players are just better than others. Players get cut and released all the time. Actually, throughout all 17 weeks of the NFL season. So why might a player choose one team over another? I mean, we look at the Pittsburgh Steelers signed tackle Ryan Harris, who also just won a ring with the Denver Broncos. He is a Super Bowl champion. Did he have any reason to leave Denver, such as Brock Osweiler did? Or you look at Russell Okung, who is a tackle that the Steelers were looking at and actually entertained just a day or two before Ryan Harris was signed. In fact, Okung tweeted, it could have been on Instagram too, but either way, it was out on Twitter. There was a picture he took of all of the 6 Lombardi trophies that sit in the Steelers' offices with a note of pretty. So Russell sends out this tweet with the photo, says it's pretty, and gets all of Steeler Nation, including myself, excited about the potential of having this Pro Bowl left tackle being Big Ben's blind side protector. But it wasn't meant to be. And instead, he goes and signs with the Denver Broncos. He replaces Ryan Harris, who comes over to the Pittsburgh Steelers, who replaces Kelvin Beachum, who goes to the Jacksonville Jaguars. And when you're looking at all of the movement, and you're wondering to yourself, well, geez, the Steelers got one heck of a value because they're not paying maybe $5-10 million a season for a left tackle such as Beachum or Okung. And then you look at the Denver Broncos, who are having to manage some of their own cap situation with some of their star players leaving or trying to keep them, such as Von Miller, who was franchise tagged. Main reason why they couldn't just keep Brock Osweiler under their thumb. And you wonder, is it purely money? Well, I'm not the kind of guy that's going to say that money is the main motivator, but let's face it, these guys aren't doing this just for the love of football. I'm sure the love of football is part of the reason why they're professional football players, why they're successful, why they excel at what they do. It also has to do with who can throw football faster, farther, more accurately. Maybe one guy's faster, one guy's stronger. Sure, there's intangibles like that. And for that reason, some guys are going to get paid more money than others. So money is a big part of it. But that really only gets there when you're a free agent. When you're finally out from whatever team drafted you, or maybe you weren't drafted at all, and you're lucky enough to stick on as an undrafted player, an undrafted free agent, bounce around from team to team. But we're mainly talking about our big name players that are available in free agency. And of course, money, just like Jerry Maguire, show me the money, is going to be a big factor in it. You're going to have players who want guaranteed money. And that's going to be one of the headlines, that so-and-so gets so much guaranteed money. Because you just never know when you may have a career-threatening injury and you're done. And you're no longer in the league. You're no longer playing football. So that guarantee, that security of having that paycheck, of knowing you're going to make at least X dollars, is kind of a big deal. Again, the window of opportunity of playing in the National Football League is short. Many players do not do this very long. They're lucky if they get a season, 2 seasons, 3 seasons. It's nice that they get vested in the union and get some of those benefits after they've been in the league for so many years. But the security of having that money and having that guarantee certainly helps. The security of having a contract that is 3 or 4 years versus 1 year. Why that might be important, so you're not a player such as Kelvin Beachum possibly getting offered a lot of 1-year prove-it deals because he's coming off of a big injury. And there are incentives there that the Jacksonville Jaguars can extend them. But maybe that's something the Pittsburgh Steelers weren't willing to extend to Beachum himself. And there is the business of football between the two negotiating parties. You have the club and you have the player. And the player's looking at it financially. They're looking at long term because a lot of them have families. And they're thinking, do I want to have to move from Florida to California for the next year? Maybe having 2, 3, or 4 years on a deal is important to me. Maybe it's that guaranteed money that's spread out over 5 years. That income that's going to be coming in. It's peace of mind. Just like any of us would want. But then you're also looking beyond the money. You look at Ryan Harris, who we did sign. Was he still wanted in Denver? Did he still want to be in Denver? He's probably looking at opportunity. And that opportunity is, who wants you? And when they want you, are they a team where you might be competing for a starting position? Look at Brock Osweiler. A very, what do you want to say, crazy kind of like tumultuous situation with the Houston Texans. At least last season with the starting quarterbacks that they had, like Ryan Mallett, Brian Hoyer. And then when those guys got hurt, I can't even tell you all of the different guys. TJ Yates, I think, was one of the guys they brought back off the streets, signed and got to play in a game. I think they went through 4 quarterbacks. The Steelers were no different last year, picking up Michael Vick, who was unwanted by most of the league. There was an opportunity for Vick to come in and become the backup quarterback for the Steelers, and then further opportunity to start when Ben Roethlisberger was injured. That's the type of opportunity that players are looking for. they're also looking for stability. Look at the Cleveland Browns. And, for those of you who listen to me, I try not to rag on them. I feel bad. I feel sympathetic. They're a team that's constantly changing. New general managers, new coaches, cleaning out the roster. Do you think a player like Brian Hartline may have had that in mind when he signed there last year? It may have been one of the few teams that wanted him and gave him an opportunity to start as a wide receiver. But is the stability there? When the next regime comes in, are they going to want to keep a Brian Hartline on that roster? And that's something that these players also have to think about. And then there's the Eric Weddle situation, where if you heard my podcast last week, I went on a huge rant about Eric Weddle talking about wanting to be on a winning team. He wants to win. And that means win a Super Bowl. But then he chose the Baltimore Ravens, who I really don't want to badmouth, especially with the situation that happened over the weekend. God bless the extended football family. My prayers go out to the family and the organization when it comes to that tragedy with Trey Walker. If you didn't hear, the young man passed away. Motorbike accident. And I don't mean to speak ill of the Ravens just on account of that. But at the same time, I have a job to do. And aside from being a big Steelers advocate, I'm not going to be a big Baltimore Ravens advocate. And furthermore, I just think that their team had many of the same problems that our team had, except they haven't fixed those problems yet. And they're coming around to do it, but just based off of last few seasons and the holes that are on that team, I'm not sure that the Baltimore Ravens was the ideal opportunity for an Eric Weddle. And of course, that has to deal with money. And anywhere he goes, he's pretty much going to have the opportunity to start. They have a stable coaching staff. So that might be one of the decisions that he went with, is stability. He may have known one of the coaches, many of the coaches, cross paths with someone somewhere else in his career. Because face it, when these players are on a team for a long time and you have the longevity of being in the league, like someone like an Eric Weddle, even a Ben Roethlisberger, you've played for different head coaches, different offensive coordinators, cross paths with different defensive coordinators, different position coaches, the receivers coach, a quarterback's coach. You're all part of a team. You've come from a college team. You have coaches that rise from the college ranks and go up to the pros, and guys that drop from the pros and come back to the college ranks. You have friends, and your friends might be playing on one team or the other. You may have played in college with them. You may have gone to a camp with them, or maybe you were met in a Senior Bowl or played for a couple years and were with maybe like a team like San Diego or Oakland, and you're crossing paths again, or maybe you're not crossing paths again, but hey, how is so-and-so over there in Baltimore? How is that one coach in Pittsburgh? What do you think? How's that front office treat everyone? That's a huge deal as a player, because again, when you have some teams that are just changing overnight, that coaching staff, that stability, and knowing someone, having maybe that in that just helps you get that edge. Maybe you get that opportunity to start. Having that link, networking with people, just as important in the real world, just the corporate world, or with friends and family, as it is with the business of the NFL. And lastly, I wanted to mention one other thing that has to come across players' minds. And I mentioned it maybe briefly as far as security or opportunity, and that would be location. It's really nice in Miami most of the year. Pittsburgh weather could get a little nasty. And then Buffalo, they just flat out cancel games and move them to a Tuesday night in Detroit if it gets too bad, as would happen several years ago when they had walls of snow and the whole stadium was buried. And I know that there's just some players, they're going to get that in the back of their mind. Maybe they've been grew up in warm climate their entire life, and they're just not interested in going to a cold weather location. Now, for the guys that are listening to this, and for the ladies who may also be tuning in, you'll get a good chuckle because we're talking about guys, males that are in their maybe early 20s, mid 20s, may become free agents. They may already be married. They may already have kids. They may have a family. And they're going to be the one that has their agent call, or maybe they're working for themselves as an agent. And you've got to tell your wife that you're going to move to Detroit from Miami or Jacksonville or San Diego or, even Dallas, Houston. Or maybe you're going to tell her, hey, we're going to move to Green Bay. Now, Green Bay is a football opportunity, but small town for someone who's maybe been living in a big city their whole life. Even Pittsburgh, fairly small when you try and compare them to Dallas or a Boston or New York City, smaller market. How's your wife going to react? Are you going to uproot kids that are in school? How does that affect you if you've decided to keep your residence where it has been, maybe your hometown, maybe somewhere in the middle of, I don't know, the Midwest? I have a buddy who moved to Kansas recently. Living in Kansas now, you're going to commute to play football in Indianapolis. How's that going to affect your life personally? And I think that's just another factor that plays in to when and where and how a lot of these players select the teams that they end up with. So it's not always money. Sometimes it's opportunity. Sometimes it's who you know. Sometimes it's location and convenience. And that is the makings of all of the fun we have during this free agency period in the NFL.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.